Hi, this is Carol Baskin, and Joe Singer had asked me a few questions about rehabbing bobcats. I thought I would answer them along with some photos to show you what we do with rehab bobcats. Joe's first question was, how do you determine whether or not to rehabilitate or release an animal like we recently did with the bobcats, Copter, and Gator? Well, that depends on how they come here. If the animal was a pet, they cannot be released back to the wild. So the only animals that we can release back to the wild are cats who were born in the wild. Anytime we are called to either rescue a bobcat who has been injured by maybe a car strike or a hunter or mauled by dogs, those cats are some of the easiest cats for us to rehabilitate and put back in the wild because they already know how to hunt. They were raised by their mothers. They know how to stay away from people. The harder ones are the orphaned kittens. Sometimes a mother bobcat is killed and her kittens are left behind. Those kittens we always try to raise in a way that we can release them back to the wild. Joe's second question was, if we are not able to release them, do we keep the animals indefinitely? And the answer is yes. If the bobcat can be successfully rehabbed and released so that we are sure that it will be able to take care of itself in the wild, then that is the happiest day of our life when we can actually set those cats free, whether they came to us as adults or as kittens. But sometimes they can't be set free. And the reason may be, such as in the case of a cat named Skip, his injuries were such that he could not pass fur or feathers or bones because his pelvis healed too narrowly. So he had to be kept on a special diet of soft food. He can't get that in the wild, and so we contacted the Florida Wildlife Commission to let them know the situation. You know, the phone only rings when I'm trying to do a recording. Anyway, so a cat like Skip could not be released back to the wild, and we would provide a forever home once we are cleared by the Florida Wildlife Commission to do so. Sometimes a kitten comes to us when they have been handled by the person who has found them first. A lot of times people will find a kitten in the wild and think that it's been abandoned, when in fact the mothers can be gone as long as 24 hours. And so the best thing to do is leave the kittens alone unless you're just sure that they're starving to death. So sometimes people will pick up a kitten, they'll try to raise it themselves, they handle it, they play with it, they bond it to themselves, and then they discover that they grow up to be bobcats, and they realize that they're not going to be able to make a pet out of this animal, and that they don't have the capacity to give them the training that they need to successfully be released back to the wild, and so they'll ask us to take the cat. On a case-by-case basis, we again discuss that with the Florida Wildlife Commission, who is in charge of all rehab animals, to discuss whether or not that cat can be released or if it needs to be kept in a cage for the rest of its life. It's really sad when a cat comes from the wild and then ends up having to be caged for its entire life. We try to keep the cats as wild as humanly possible. Sometimes that's difficult because if they have a long recovery from broken bones or severe injuries, they may have to be kept in our cat hospital for a while. So we try to monitor the cats with cameras so that we can see how they are progressing, because they behave very differently when a human is around and when a human is not around. Same thing goes once they are released out into the outdoor enclosures. We have closed circuit TVs out there that monitor their progress. That way we don't have to be around them and they don't have to be around people, and keeping that contact to an absolute minimum is crucial to the success of their release. Through these television cameras, video cameras, we are able to tell whether or not the cat is catching their own food. Now, the cages that they are put in have a small mesh over the cage openings so that wild animals cannot get into the cage because we don't want to introduce them to diseases. But we do have a tunnel system where we have these long PVC like sewer pipes that come out into the cage all at different places, and we will put rats into the tube and do that a far distance from the cat so the cat doesn't know when food is coming. The rats can take all day to come down the tube. They may come down the tube right away. They may come up in different areas of the enclosure. And so the cat has to learn how to be on the lookout for food all the time, just like they would in the wild. Through the cameras, we can tell whether or not they're able to capture the food and kill it quickly, which is important because you don't want them to catch meals and not be able to hang on to them. And once we see that they are capable of doing that, then they are ready for release. The only exception to that is if it is a kitten. Sometimes we need to make sure that the kitten is big enough to be able to fend for themselves in case there are other big cats in the area that would come after them, and so that may take a little bit longer. Joe asked if it's difficult emotionally for us or our staff to release the cats, and asked if we get worried about their chances for survival. And the answer is yes. It is very difficult for us after we have nurtured an animal through such a precarious time to feel like, okay, this animal's really ready to go back to the wild. And as much as we all want that and we want to put them back in the wild as quickly as possible because that's where they belong, it's scary. It's like sending your first grader off to school for the first time. You worry so much about stay away from the coyotes and stay away from humans and don't go near traffic. All those things are going through your head as you're opening the door to let them go. Joe asked if it's easier to rehab and release younger bobcats than the older ones, and the answer to that is no. The older ones are far easier because they already have all of the skills that they needed to survive. Dealing with their injuries can be a little bit more difficult because no matter how badly they're hurt, they're going to spend every waking opportunity, if you're dressing wounds or having to apply topical ointments or give them medications, they're going to be constantly coming after you, and they're dangerous. They're really incredibly powerful, dangerous animals given their small size. The little bobcats, though, the babies, those are the ones that worry us the most because they do have to learn so much, and they have to learn it in such a way that does not bond them to humans. So that makes it very difficult to come up with different ways of teaching them how to hide from people, teaching them how to catch their own food. We can only guess as to their ability to learn some of the other things that they would have gotten from their mothers, such as how to behave around other bobcats, how to pick a good mate. Those are things that we really can't teach them. If it's at all possible, if we can raise more than one bobcat kitten together, then we do that. Sometimes we have an opportunity where there are feral cats that we can have tested and raise those cats and their kittens with the bobcats. And that's a secondary way. It's not as good as raising them with other bobcats, but it's rare that we have more than one bobcat come in at a time. And another way that we try with the baby bobcats is sometimes we'll put them in a carrier and take them to areas where we have caged bobcats who cannot be set free, so that they learn the language and that they kind of pick up on the body language of other bobcats. They can't have contact with them because the bigger cats would kill them, but at least they get to see what other bobcats are like. Joe asked how we determine which of the rescued bobcats are suitable for release, and the answer I kind of touched on is that they have to be able to hunt, they have to be able to protect themselves, and if they can do that, then they are suitable for release. She also asked if we give them a special diet and what they are fed while they're in captivity. We start out the baby bobcats on chopped up rat meat, and then we graduate them to a full rat, and then we graduate them to live rats. We feed the adult bobcats as soon as they are capable of eating. If they've been hit in the face and had any kind of damage done to their jaw, they might be on a soft diet for a while, but as soon as they are able to eat rats, that's what we provide them with. And it's expensive. The rats that we buy are bought from a provider who provides people that have snakes. And the price per pound, I'd just be guessing, but I would think the price per pound is far, far more than what we spend on our other diet, which is really expensive. The natural balance that we feed the rest of our cats is $3.20 a pound, but the rats are far more expensive. In Florida, bobcats eat rabbits, and we also feed dead rabbits that we buy frozen, and then we feed a few of the rabbits live to the bobcats to make sure that they can catch them, because they're different than the rats, and they have to be able to know how to catch them and not get their faces kicked off by the scratching feet. So it takes a little bit of skill for the cats to pick up on that, but it's really hard for us to do because we're all a bunch of animal lovers here, and we just hate to even think about feeding live prey to any of the cats, and especially the rabbits. That's really hard for us. But we have to make sure that the cats can catch their own food and know what their food looks like out in the wild. Another big favorite of bobcats are wild turkeys, and usually before we release the cats, we will give them at least one wild turkey to make sure that they understand that this is a food source, this is something you're really going to like when you leave here, and so that we're sure that they're capable of capturing and killing a wild turkey. Joe asked if there were any of these bobcats that we became particularly attached to, and the answer is yes. It's not so much the cats that are capable of being released that we build such a bond with, because we don't have any contact with them, or as little contact as possible. But there have been a few cases where the cats have had brain damage, either where they had been struck by a car in the head, or they had been poisoned, or we're seeing a huge problem in Florida where these cats are having all kinds of brain disorders, and we don't know if that's from food in their environment being contaminated with mercury or what's causing that, but I think the Florida bobcat is in serious crisis. At any rate, the cats that we have become most attached to have been those that were not suitable for release because of the fact that they just could not process what they were seeing in their environment enough to be able to hunt or to stay away from people. A particular case was Rufus the bobcat. He was not a Florida bobcat, so he was not a candidate for release. He came from South Carolina, but he had seizures, and he was just the most precious little thing because he just didn't have that bobcat mentality, and it was really hard when we lost him to a massive seizure. He had a lot of fans who watched him on Ustream. We keep webcams on our cats so that our support base out there can actually keep a watch on the cats and let us know if they're getting into trouble or if they're doing something weird, if they're behaving in a way that looks like it's an emergency for us to get into the cat hospital and help them, such as with the seizures. And so Rufus had a tremendous following, as did Skip the bobcat, with people who watched them for a very long time during their time in the cat hospital. So yes, we do get very attached to some of these cats, and as for the ones that are released, we love them to death. We really, really want them to have the best possible life out there, but you don't build that really close relationship with them if you're not having hands-on with them all the time, and that's good for them, and that's what we want to do.